Kia ora katoa. My name is Jeanette Mindham and I am the coordinator of the Businesswomen's Network here at the Tauranga Chamber of Commerce. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to be part of the Groundswell Festival once again. It's something the Businesswomen's Network has been part of for the last 3 years. Usually it is a lunchtime event where we have our hosts in person, but due to COVID this year we've gone online. But that has not deterred us at all from having a great lineup of speakers today to share their experiences with you and to inspire you to get a bit more creative and venture more into the innovation field. Today our speakers are George Magdalinos, an engineer in the Royal New Zealand Air Force, and also the 2019 Westpac Woman of Influence finalist in the Innovation and Science category, and also an officer in charge of the Schools to Skies program. And then also we have Ngaire Woodhams from EY. She is the New Zealand lead in the wavespace area, which is the global network for growth and innovation in EY. And also we have our own Kirstin Mead from the Tauranga Chamber of Commerce, who is our innovation manager and the Callaghan innovation representative for the whole of Bay of Plenty. Today's webinar is going to be a fairly informal style. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share a little bit about themselves first of all, how they've got to where they've got to and some of the challenges they've faced. And then we'll be having a few questions, and it's over to you in the audience too to fire some questions through simply by putting them through the Q&A button at the bottom of your panel there. If you submit them through. If you have them specific for one of the speakers, please put their name in and the question you'd like to ask. Right, I'm not going to take up any more time in deterring from our fabulous panel. So I'd ask first of all, George, over to you first to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Fred. Kia ora, everybody. My name is George Magdalinos. I'm an engineer in the Royal New Zealand Air Force, and I have the enormous privilege of leading our School to Skies program, but also Operation Tangata Ka Nodo, or OPTK for short. And what that is it's I essentially lead the Air Force's youth investment and outreach programs, and we're all about getting young people, young Kiwi kids, particularly gender and ethnic minorities, fostering curiosity, growing in confidence, influencing subject choice, and providing a career context from an NZ Inc. STEM career perspective, so that we can populate the talent pipeline with lots of magnificent talent. Diverse talent going forward. So how did I get here? I've had a long career with the Air Force so far. I joined in 1998 as an aircraft tech, and I commissioned in 2005 as an engineer. I've been all over the world leading engineering teams. I've served on all 4 bases, and I've deployed operationally in Egypt back at the start of the Arab Spring. So I've been enormously privileged to do what I do. So how did I get here? I guess it was a mixture of timing and luck to an extent that I manufactured. I was on a Global Women Breakthrough Leadership Program. I had a commercial imperative that I needed to deliver. I recognised that my time was now, having dabbled in the diversity and inclusion space for a good long while, and seized that opportunity with both hands. The success of School to Skies, which is a residential program for Year 13 young women, I used that to leverage the continuum of engagement from new entrants through to Year 11. So everything that I've done to this point came to a pinnacle, if you like, and I guess recognising that time was the secret to my success. It hasn't been easy. I'm the only one of my kind in the Defence Force. It's lonely, and I've had to find, you know, that source of support from around New Zealand. So that's me.
That's great, thanks George. And now we'll go on to you, Ngaire.
Thanks, Jeanette. So as Jeanette said in my introduction, I lead wavespace for EY New Zealand, and as she mentioned, EY or Ernst & Young, wavespace is our global network of growth and innovation experience centres. It's much more than just a physical place, and it's an experience. So my role centres around designing the physical, digital and mental space where people can safely explore new ideas. We help them unlock ingenuity, drive innovation, and make change happen faster. And sort of in simple terms, or in plain English, I design and facilitate workshops to help teams and businesses reframe their thinking and find answers faster. Part of what I also do, I guess by and large, is I have a role educating EY and bringing new ways of working with our clients across our entire firm. So that's across our consulting practice, tax, audit, and our strategy and transaction teams to support better project outcomes and help deepen our relationships with clients. My career journey, I'm a bit of a slashy, and by that I mean I've had multiple careers. My background is in, my first career was in event management, which I fell into just by chance, and I spent a good chunk of my time both in London, running big financial conferences during the global financial crisis. And when I came back to New Zealand, I sort of hit a bit of a brick wall as to what I wanted to do or what the opportunities were out there for me. And I sort of fell into a role after I had my first daughter, working for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise with Better by Design. And that's where I fell into the world of design thinking and really being exposed to innovation methodologies. So I spent a couple of years designing learning experiences, facilitating workshops around design thinking and helping New Zealand exporters understand that methodology, but also really working with exporters to learn how to design and create products for what people really need, not what they just want to sell. And how I ended up at EY, I guess sort of cycled through a few different kinds of roles before I landed at EY, but really what I've been able to do since I joined in March last year is bring together my two careers of event management and also design thinking and innovation methodologies. So much like George, who said that, you know, she's unique and sort of one of a kind within her area, particularly within defence, is that I'm a bit of a unicorn in my organisation. And when we talk about finding the sort of skills that we need for this line of work, it really comes down to people who just know how to solve problems in different ways, can hold conversations with people, and yeah, it's been an interesting, it's definitely been an interesting ride. I think the other thing that I reflect back on in terms of people who have influenced me and sort of shaped how my career has ended up here is definitely my time at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. So working with a woman, Melissa Jenner, and the team that we had there, I've encountered a few people outside of within the Bay of Plenty who were our design coaches, but really being exposed to design thinking, and also people who were trained out of Stanford University, the Stanford D School, really kind of set my world on fire in terms of there's actually better ways to solve problems rather than just sitting around a table trying to talk about it. So that was definitely a big career pivot for me, and she's had a big influence on where I've ended up today.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And with that intro with the NZTE, it segues nicely into Kirstin, who is, as I mentioned, our innovation manager here at Tauranga Chamber and representative of Callaghan Institute from NZTE. So over to you, Kirstin.
Tēnā koutou katoa, no Waikato aho, ke Mount Maunganui aho e noho ana, ko Kirstin aho, ko Callaghan Innovation te whare, ko tā Paul Callaghan te tangata, he Innovation Manager aho, no reira anei te whakatauaki o Callaghan Innovation roko hia te wahi naro, he maunga tātai whetū, Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora. I'm Kirstin. I hail from the mighty Waikato, and I now live in Mount Maunganui in the beautiful Bay of Plenty. But I've come here via many locations, Blenheim, Auckland, Wellington, a few locations across the world, and now call the Mount home, which is amazing. I represent Callaghan Innovation, and Callaghan Innovation is named after an amazing scientist who was a physicist, a man called Sir Paul Callaghan. I represent Callaghan in the Bay of Plenty, and I'll talk a little bit about what we get up to anyway, but Callaghan Innovation is New Zealand's innovation agency, and our whakatauaki, or our purpose, is to we have a saying which is rukohia te wahi ngaro hei maunga tātai whetū, which is all about exploring the unknown in the pursuit of excellence. So very much around pushing the buttons and trying to innovate and find a good way to do things, basically. So yeah, I work here in the Bay of Plenty. I originally followed the same path as George, actually, which is where we met. In 2000, I joined the Royal New Zealand Air Force and spent 8 years in the military as a communications and information systems technician, which sounds really fancy, but really was a lot of operating a radio and talking to planes, and spent a little bit of time offshore in Afghanistan and a few other locations around the world. And I think now that I look back, the time I spent in Afghan was really what drove me to want to work in the world of economic development, which I didn't know at the time. And you know, in hindsight, you look back and realize what things impact you. And funny enough, so when I got home from Afghanistan, I decided to leave the Air Force and go and do a degree. So I moved back to Hamilton, where I grew up, and studied economics and strategy, and found that development economics was my passion. And I really loved the concepts and the theory of macro and microeconomics, which sounds really nerdy. So then living in the world of where I don't really do much planning sometimes, and I fell into a job at Deloitte. So I then went into a professional service world, and I worked as an internal auditor, where I was working with a lot of companies that were receiving research and development funding and support from government. Hence, I kind of learned about this R&D space in this world. So I realized that I wasn't going to end up working for MFAT and doing the whole international economic development, but then realized that there's actually economic development you can do in your own backyard. So I ended up moving across to an organization that was established 7 years ago called Callaghan Innovation. I joined them just over 6 years ago now, and basically have not really looked back. And so I work as a representative in the Bay of Plenty, just helping businesses that are innovative and that do research and development, that want to get access to the support that is available. So it's really it's a super connector role. I literally enable people to do what they want to do and help them get there. So yeah, that's my very fast journey. And yeah, where I've come to now.
Wow, that's great. All three of you have just had such an amazing, diverse background, which I think obviously has all contributed to the roles that you're playing now. And perhaps too is what has led you into this innovation field, is having that diversity too. One of the key things we're banding around this word innovation, etc. So I'd be really interested from each of you, if you could define what you define as an innovator, and what do you think are their key qualities? George, go back to you.
To tell you the truth, and I think I said this earlier amongst the group, I would describe myself as a little bit of an entrepreneur. So I get the opportunity to be really super creative from within the organisation, using the business resources. And so I've got a fairly lengthy platform that lets me do that. I think for me, one of the keys was having a rock solid understanding of what my purpose is and what drives me, because it can be hard when you're first starting out. So what drives me, what gets me out of bed in the morning, is this overwhelming need to provide opportunity so that people can live into their potential. So in my trade as an engineer, I get to do that by virtue of being a leader or a commander or in a position of authority. But the space that I'm working in now, it's that passion and that energy that helps you get through the long nights, the extra tough hours, when the world feels like they're against you because they don't understand what you're trying to do or anything like that. It's that energy that's going to carry you through. So I would describe that as as something that you really need to have a handle on.
No, how would you add to that?
I think there's a quote by Albert Einstein that says we can't solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And for me, that's always been a bit of a driving force as to how I approach my work or how I approach working with clients, is that, the world is changing so quickly, and even, more so in the last sort of 6 months, that the world has shifted exponentially in terms of how it's functioning across many different levels. And now is the time, now it's never been more important to start thinking about problems in different ways. And I guess the other thing is being comfortable with not knowing the answer. We don't have a crystal ball. The crystal ball's been smashed to pieces at the moment. We sort of don't know what's going to happen at the moment. And I think it's being comfortable with not knowing the answer. It's being okay with living in ambiguity and being able to navigate that. So
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
And that for me is, one of the biggest things. The second thing would be, and you hear it quite often, is, being okay with failure. Innovating is failing fast, breaking it, smashing it, and moving on. And I think, particularly for women sometimes, because we are always jostling for our place or whatever, is that, how we perceive failure is different to how, say, other people might perceive it. So I think it's just being comfortable with the fact that failure is okay. If we are going to be innovative, we're going to have to try some stuff out. We're going to have to see if it's going to work, because we don't know what the future holds. So that would be my sort of insights on that.
And Kirstin, through your vast experience with meeting various people through Callaghan, and are there key qualities that you're seeing in some of the innovative people that you're coming across?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess innovation from the way that I look at it, from my lens, is really about creating value from something and solving a problem. There's no point coming up with a solution to something when there's actually no problem to solve. And I have those conversations on a daily basis with amazing inventors, and they've got this wonderful invention but they've never actually thought about what problem the invention's solving, or whether there's a valid customer that actually needs to purchase this innovation or or invention. So innovation, it doesn't have to be about a new product or a new service or anything like that. It's really just about thinking about how do you create value in a different way. And value is obviously pretty subjective. Value to some people is making money. Value to other people is the social impact that you can have. And all of the above, but value can also be about the environmental impact that you might be having. So I guess from my perspective, innovation is extremely broad. It's actually a discipline. To be innovative, there is a discipline behind it. It's not just throwing ideas and brainstorming at a wall. There's actually ways and means that you can pull innovation out of people, such as the design thinking frameworks. It's from the aspect, from what I see, it is all about that creating value and solving an actual real life problem. Otherwise, what's the point, really?
And I just build on that from what Kirstin said, is that sometimes the problem you think you're wanting to solve isn't actually the problem you need to solve. And so it's unpacking, exploring what that is. You might go in with a bit of a hypothesis around, I think this is what the problem is, but the deeper you go into it, and whatever innovation practices or methods you go through, inherently you come out with a slightly different problem that you're wanting to tackle. But that makes it all the more richer meaningful.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, it's all well and good you having a problem, but is it actually a problem that everyone is having for a start? Is it, you know, if you wanted to build, I guess I look at this from a business lens, if you wanted to build a solution or a business case around something, there's a lot of lack of validation sometimes, and it really is, you need to go and talk to people and you need to actually understand the problem first. And to be honest, I think women are a bit better at realizing you need to go and ask people and ask questions when you're looking for the answers or you're looking to validate something, more so than men, because they just think they're right half the time. No offense, not men bagging, no.
It was actually works really well into the next question, was really much, you know, why do you feel we need to have more women in the innovation space? I mean, do you see it, first of all, I suppose the question is, do you see a lack of women in this space? And, you know, with some of the programs you've got, particularly you, George, is encouraging more women in the area. You know, why do you feel there need to be more women, and what can we bring to the table? Just expanding on what you said.
Yeah, so the 4 pillars of our framework that we take into Optique is experiential learning, it's role modelling, it's collaboration, and it's empowerment. And I think as women, and particularly young women, you know, all the research, the New Zealand-based research says that a young woman especially will make up her mind to STEM or not to STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths, by the time she turns 12. And once she has, she often doesn't go back. And so, you know, for me, it's a large part of it is about that role modeling and creating an opportunity where our young women can see themselves thriving in that space. You know, you go back to the old adage, you can't be what you can't see. And for women especially, they need to see somebody in the flesh to be able to imagine themselves doing it.
Anyone else got anything further to add to that?
I think if I reflect around the people who I work with on a regular basis, when I think of you know, people working in that more science, tech, engineering, math spaces, we've got some phenomenal women here at EY who are doing amazing things in a lot of the data science subjects around machine learning and automation. But they are, you know, it is, you know, outweighed by, you know, the ratio of men to women. But we are actually seeing a lot more grads coming through in our grad intakes. There's a lot more females coming through who have that background, which is really encouraging to see. I think building on what George said is that, you know, as I guess children start to lose that creativity and curiosity, kind of that little nugget of gold around the age of 8 or 9, I think it is. And that's where they start to have this self-doubt that, oh, I can't be creative, or, you know, I can't sort of keep asking all those questions through whatever, you know, ways, you know, children are being taught, or even, you know, I'll stop asking so many questions, you know, just this is how we learn, this is how we do it. And I think it's really important to try and keep that creativity and curiosity spark alive, just keep them building with stuff, breaking stuff, you know, playing around with stuff, because the more that you can encourage that, particularly in girls, the more, you know, hopefully the more likely they are to pursue a career that explores, you know, the what ifs through science, you know, through those sort of STEM subjects.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I'll add to that, because it's actually something that I'm involved with in a volunteer perspective. Is there is you both mentioned it, from the age of 9 or 10, kids don't know what they don't want to do because they haven't either experienced it or they've realized they don't like it. And there's a lot of research out there that shows, from a science perspective, by the time kids are 10, they know what career they're not going to do. And that's across the board, boys and girls, obviously. And if kids haven't had that positive experience in school at that under 10 level, they're not going to do it, because they think that science is for smart kids, or they think that they don't realize that that's an opportunity that they can actually go and follow. So just on that, I sit as a chair of a charitable trust called the House of Science, which is purely all about empowering those young kids to think scientifically, have that healthy curiosity to ask questions and to help them, you know, ask questions about the world and how teach them to be scientifically literate, even if it's just the basics of questioning some facts and actually following where that information comes from. So I guess the House is, preaching to probably the converted here, but you know, the House of Science is an amazing charitable organisation that basically delivers incredible bilingual science resources into schools so that teachers have the resources and the confidence to actually promote that positive engagement with science with hands-on experiments for kids. Because it's not done in schools, would you believe? Less than 25% of primary schools in New Zealand have an active science education, well, basically teach science in general. So if you're not teaching it, you ain't going to get them at year 13 wanting to go into science or engineering or any of those STEM subjects if they're not even exposed to it. So it starts right from day dot, really, doesn't it?
You know, it's interesting you say that. As part of our programs, we like, I'm all about partnering for mutual benefit and value exchange, and you know, part of the programs we deliver, and something that you said I just clicked in on, you know, the youngsters that we put 45,000 youngsters through our year 7 and 8 programs for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. But part of it, we deliver a leadership package, if you like. We call it leadership, but it's based on the 21st century skill set of work with the growth mindset, the resilience training, the critical thinking, the problem solving. And I think all of that meshes together when you start to talk about innovation, because innovation doesn't mean that you need to have a STEAM background necessarily, but some of those methodologies that we take into it is all the other stuff around, you know, and we use a augment and complement strategy. So for me, it's about that collaboration and not duplicating or making redundant what everybody else is doing. So when you say House of Science, I'm like, how can we work together, frankly? Yeah, you know, because I've got a plane and we can do this, and you know, but that's what it's all about. It's about it's not getting into the school teaching or the New Zealand curriculum and saying you're doing it all wrong. It's, I'm an SME in this field and I have all of these resources. How can I help you, the teaching faculty of New Zealand, you know, help our students be ready for the future of work, because it's changing. And that's where the innovation comes in. Sorry, I digressed a bit.
That's great.
One of the things you've all mentioned around innovation is that creativity and curiosity spirit. Most of us are beyond 8 years old now, but how do we tap back into that and foster that sort of in our own organisations too? I mean, what skills and tips have you got for ourselves as individuals and for us in terms of being able to bring it into our organisations?
As adults, I'd say put yourself in your 8-year-old shoes. You know, because somewhere along the line we lose that, and we lose how to have fun, and we lose how to be curious, and we lose and we get caught up. But just play. There's learning through play a lot of the time. I'm sorry I haven't got anything more profound, but we've got to come full circle and put ourselves in those kids' shoes, I would say.
I guess from my perspective, it's really just to challenge the status quo. Don't just stick to how we've always done it. You know, this is, you don't have to always do it like it's always been done. Rethink how you're going to do things, simple things. Look at simple processes you're doing. Look at the way that you approach tasks each time. Is there a different way that we can do it? Is there some simple tools that can help us change the way we do things? So it's really just simple changes can make a huge difference. And the more you see the value in just tweaking how you think about things, then the more you're going to start continually doing it on a day-to-day basis without even realizing that you're actually starting to change that mindset of challenging your own bias. Really, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I can probably add on that I've sort of clients that we've worked with, you know, some of them are pale, male and stale. So, you know, it's working. We've worked with some really interesting groups of people. And what, you know, sort of what we tend to do is one of the easiest ways we sort of get people to think differently is literally just standing up, and rather than looking at, you know, a bunch of slides or, you know, circling the drain on some, you know, circular conversation it's not going anywhere, is physically getting people to stand up and to just position themselves on a continuum. And we start to move, you know, we pose a series of questions and we look at, well, how does that change your perception of X or Y? Let's start a debate, and how can we, you know, how we, you know, getting alignment on certain things. And by getting people away from, I guess, traditional sort of ways of looking at things, is let's just move away from that, and, you know, physically get people up on their feet. The other thing, some of the other stuff that we've been doing is almost, you could quasi call it kind of a vague guided meditation, but you get people to think of a scenario in the future, and you can do it in many different ways, whether you know, actually have someone read that future state out, or you play like an audio track and then you pose them a series of questions. So again, you just get them to sort of listen to things, or, you know, sometimes read things and say, well, put yourselves in that future state, and how do we work backwards as to where we are today. So if we're trying to solve a, you know, a problem that might be in the future, is let's start in the future and then look at the steps we need to make today to get to that point. And then I'd say the other thing, people probably already know about this, but, you know, Lego has its own line of serious play Lego, which is Lego sets specifically designed for adults. And that's been one of the biggest, you know, sort of tools I've seen, where you actually you give people a set of Lego and say, build your scenario, or build what's going on, and now let's, you know, rebuild it again based on, you know, some sort of influencing factors. And I really like doing that, but some people are like, oh, why you got the Lego out again? It's like, well, why not? Yeah.
I would also sort of say that, you know, when you're influencing any kind of change, whether it's innovative or not, but when you're in that change space, carry with you an understanding that it's a journey, and you're not going to get everybody in your organization on your side right from the outside, and that's going to take a fair amount of, like for me, I had to really it took time for me to understand that not everybody's on my wavelength, and it doesn't matter how good I am. I think I am at that influencing space. If you've got an audience of 300 or 400 and you've changed the mindsets of 12, then that's okay, because it's incremental. It may not necessarily happen overnight, and that was something that a good mate of mine helped me understand along the way.
You've both mentioned at times it's quite lonely and you're in this unique position, and you've mentioned support networks. I mean, how would you encourage us to support one another on these journeys and things like that? You know, where have you found your support?
So I have a strategy, and you're not going to like it, in a sense that I think one of my talents is I'm a really great connector. And my strategy is this: I will stalk people until I declare the friendship, and then they're obligated to help me. So look out, I'm coming for you. My life goal for this year is to become friends with the Prime Minister and Hilary Barry, but, you know, haven't quite got there. COVID interrupted that a little bit. But all jokes aside, I can't tell you how invaluable I've found Dr. Michelle Dickinson and her husband Joe Davis, and, you know, whilst they don't understand my organisation as well as I do, perhaps they understand the space that we're working in, and I think we've got to get away from, forgive me for not directly answering your question, but competing with each other, and women are really bad for it, you know, and it's this idea that sharing information so that somebody else isn't literally reinventing the wheel is a good way. But find your people and surround yourself with them, and give as good as you get in terms of that offering to share would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that. I live and breathe in the world of innovation, so I probably don't struggle for people to support me. But I see it all the time with young women and men that come through the door that are not sure on themselves and they don't want to back themselves. And it's really just encouraging and giving them the tools and connecting them to the right people. I mean, my role 100% is enabling and connecting. So, you know, I live and breathe that, and it's all through relationships and all through the people you know. So it's just having the confidence to keep relationships going and to you know, call on people when you need them.
Yeah.
You use my strategy too, friend.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in terms of you know, reaching out to people, I've always kept my door open for people who are like, you know, can I just pick your brains about what you do? And invariably it'll end up in a conversation where I'll say, you should go and talk to these 3 people because, you know, they're really good. You know, I don't know the answer to that, but these 3 people do. And so it's just, you know, as George and Kirstin said, it's just about sort of connecting people. I think on the other front, part of the way I ended up in EY where I am now was purely through identifying who I sort of wanted to work for. And luckily I had some connections here already, and, you know, even other places I was considering working for, I actually just dropped them, found a connection in there and said, are you okay if I just come in, have a chat with you, catch up for a coffee? All they can do is say no, but 99% of the time they'll say yes. And generally people do just want to, you know, have a yarn. That's what we're relatively all good at. And I think when it comes to sort of testing out an idea or a hunch that you've got in your head, sound it out with someone. They might bring a completely different perspective to it. They might go, oh, actually, I know that so-and-so's doing something similar. You guys should, you know, have a chat and possibly collaborate, mash it up, or, you know, mash up whatever you've got going on. It could be, you know, the missing link in each other's kind of, you know, in each other's kind of space.
I think the key message that we've all said is that none of us have solved any problems on our own, and it really is about the connections and the people you know and the relationships that you build.
Absolutely. Well, now have we got any questions coming through from audience out there? Any questions you panel may have of each other as well, as you've heard each other's stories?
Is there, you know, we've all, like the methodology we've been sort of referring to a little bit is that human design, centered design thinking. And I have to admit that's the methodology that we took into the work that we do too. I haven't found yet the New Zealand provider. Like, do we all have to go offshore and learn that, or do you guys, where do we get that training from in-house?
I mean, there's a lot more people. I mean, it was like 6 or 7 years since I was with NZTE, and at the time, NZ Better by Design in particular was one of the very few kind of organizations who were running, you know, design thinking 101 sort of experience, and that was very much just for exporting companies. I think now some of the universities are picking up papers in it. There's a lot more practitioners, you know, in this space who are delivering training. I think one of them, there's the Design Thinkers Academy. I know that there's someone, Zoe Shamel, who was in the Z refinery for a while. She's running that training. But personally, I learned by osmosis. I've never been taught it. I've never been formally trained in it. I learned from someone. And a lot of what I know has been picked up on the job, and it's just making it my own. I do know that when you get more into the field of things like service design or UX or customer experience, there are, you know, that does have a slightly more, I guess, technical or slightly academic element to it, for lack of a better word. And there are a lot more, you know, tertiary, you know, providers who are teaching in that space. But certainly, like, all of the online platforms like Udemy and Coursera and whatever, they've all got, everyone's doing it. So Yeah.
Get on to that, Ngaire. This year we've got the University of Waikato campus based here in Tauranga, and this year we I didn't do much at all really, but they announced that they with the university they've released a whole lot of micro-credential courses that are focused solely around innovation and the frameworks around innovation. And literally last week, the first one I think started, which was all specifically around design thinking.
Nice.
But you know, that's one of multitudes of frameworks that are related to that innovation world. And it's the first university in New Zealand to deliver these, and they're being delivered by, you know, those amazing design thinkers that you know of that have come out of New Zealand Prize and now deliver this on a, you know, daily, just about daily basis. We work with them really closely here in Tauranga. In fact, we have an enormous group, a meetup group, which is called Design Thinking and Innovation. There's 555 members in it, just local people. So we meet once a month, and we just, it's honestly the most incredible group of people. So if you ever want to be inspired by amazing brains, come along to that meetup. It is, I come away from them fully energized each time, because it's just, they're the early adopters, and they're the ones that are going to make a difference and make a big change in the world. So if you ever want to be in with those ones, come along to a meetup. They're pretty amazing.
I often go to things like that, and it goes one of two ways. You walk away feeling completely inadequate or wonderfully inspired. So, you know,
hopefully more inspired than inadequate.
Yeah. What do our questions look like, friend?
Kirstin, those meetings here in Tauranga, so anyone can turn up to them, and how do people find out about them?
So literally meetup.com is the website, so it's all done through that big behemoth that is Meetup. But Design Thinking and Innovation is the label of it, or the title of the meetup, and you just join it. So you just sign up and join through that website through meetup.com. Cool. The micro-credential stuff going on through the university, you can link into that through Priority One, who's our local economic development agency, or just go straight to the university. They're being sort of promoted and announced now, and it's what they're doing is that we're looking to have about 30 odd, so there's a lot of different kind of things you can delve into, lots of different frameworks, and we're going to, and one day down the track you can probably, you know, do a multitude of those courses, and you actually get some form of postgrad certificate, or because it's all kind of linked into the university way of doing things, whatever we want to call it. Cool. There's a question on there from Alana. How do you find out about what primary schools have science? Well, first talk to your primary school, because every single primary school can decide how they are going to deliver, or if they're going to deliver science. Quite often, the biggest problem with science in schools is that the teachers either don't get taught how to teach science, and it's quite a scary thing to teach if you don't understand, and they don't have the resources to actually teach science, which is why House of Science began, who are now in 11 regions around the country and growing quickly. I think we reach about 60,000 students a year who get the access to learn science in English and Te Reo, actually. It's a bilingual resource, which is amazing. So if you're interested in your own specific school, or for your own children, then it's go and talk to the principal, and if they don't have House of Science, tell them to get it.
And if they don't want House of Science, then get them to Google School to Skies on the Road.
Do all of it. Funny.
Do we have any other questions from the audience there? Just type it through on the Q&A function at the bottom.
Just while we're waiting for some more questions, a friend of mine is doing a micro-credential through the Tech Futures Lab, which is based up here in Auckland, around organisational agility, which is more delving into the realms of that problem-solving space. So, you know, how do you take traditional ways of thinking and basically flip it on its head to really get organisations thinking differently, sort of relating back to that Albert Einstein quote that I shared earlier, and that it's only just going through its first cohort at the moment, and yeah, it sounds pretty amazing, pretty powerful. But cool that Waikato's doing those micro credentials as well. I might have to look those up, Kirstin.
There's a question on here from Sarah. It says, what is your favourite methods for gaining deep empathy-based insights for service and product design?
You know, that's really hard when you're dealing with 10 and 11-year-olds.
I think if I reflect back on, well, if I think about the people who I know who work in this space, deep empathy is really talking to people, and it is about interviews and having a very powerful line of questioning and being able to dig a bit deeper, you know, why. It's all about the why. Well, why do you do, you know, why is that? Tell me about that. How does that make you feel? And I remember back to a time where I was interviewed about my experiences with fishing and boating, and just how I was engaged in that process. And the questions took me back to when I was a kid, and it actually invoked tears on my behalf because of the happy memories that it brought up. And when you're a skill, you know, sort of when you practice that craft, it can actually, you know, be a very powerful tool. I think on the product front, what is the most interesting things I've always seen is, you know, that observational, just watching people use a product. It's like you give it to them with no instructions and you say, use it, and you watch them interact with it. You know, they might use it in completely different ways that it was designed for, but it's, you know, just watching people in their natural habitat is always, you know, super fascinating.
One of the other questions we've had come through is, how did you find your purpose and passion? Or how would you encourage someone to find it?
Well, I'll go. Well, I don't know. Do we all just fall into it when we find it? We find it. I don't know. I fell into mine because I realized I really got great satisfaction out of helping people and seeing them get to do what they want to do, and being able to enable that in people is certainly something that has given me great purpose. Hence, I do what I do, I suppose. But it was a long time coming, because I honestly think it was from my time in the military that defined sort of what I enjoyed doing, and then through trial and error and seeing what I didn't like doing, since I'm on to my 3rd or 4th career now. Yeah, you just find it comes sooner or later. I don't know, there's no recipe, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the trick is being able to label it, right? Like, you know what you like and you know what you're good at, and then being able to articulate that is the next thing. Again, I'm the same as you, friend. I have been always naturally drawn to unlocking potential in people. And I don't know what it is. You can go back to a conversation about good leaders born or made, that kind of thing. I think the more that you expose yourself to, the more you put yourself out there, the more that you tick the yes box, and open yourselves up to a variety of opportunities, the more that you'll come to figure it out. And I think part of what we talk about is this understanding that you need to take a bit of risk, and that career pathways aren't linear anymore, and that we're all going round like this until we figure it out. But what draws you back and grounds you is that understanding of what makes you happy, really.
Yeah, I think it was only really in the last sort of 18 months or so that I worked out what my purpose was for now. I'm not under no illusions that it could actually change, you know, could change over time, but my passion and my purpose, I sort of, you know, only really came to after a reasonable amount of soul searching and jumping from different jobs and setting myself a challenge of trying to stick at something where I needed to be, and sort of really, you know, bed in what I was truly passionate about. And I think it's, you know, to something George said the other, you know, earlier on, is that when you sort of wake up in the morning and you're not got the huge amounts of dread 24/7. You're like, oh, I have to do this again. Oh, I have to get up and, do that. Is when that, you have that shift in your attitude to your work, and you're like, yep, even though it's been a challenging couple of days, I can still get up with that conviction and, hit the ground running and almost be able to deflect any of the day-to-day stuff that might come your way. So, yeah.
That's great. A couple more questions have come through. Following on for that is, what has been your most challenging experience and what did you do to overcome it?
I've had two, and not necessarily in this current line of work. My value set was questioned when I was working for another organisation, and when that internal value set was compromised, I elected to leave the organisation, and to the tune where I'd calculated how long I could pay the mortgage with no job, because I'd rather not sacrifice my internal values. And I guess that was a conscious decision that I made with my wife at the time, to being able to do that. In all honesty, it took me 18 months to rebuild from it. And the second one was a presentation I gave to an organisation where a friend of mine and I walked in the room and raised the female representation by about 500%, and there was only two of us. The audience was about 400 people, and they stopped listening after I said we run a Year 13 program for women. And again, that's where you use the power of your colleagues and connections around you to give you that little pep talk, because I could have thrown in the towel at that point. It's like, well, what's the point? Because this is today's generation. This is what I'm up against, particularly in an organisation like mine, where it's very traditional and very hierarchical and stuck in its ways in some respects. And to get through it, it was all about letting people support me, not feeling like you have to have, the banner flying and the torch going and fronting it all day, every day. It's okay to sort of have a little bit of a lull and then get up and go again.
Wow.
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was probably, it was probably a period over about sort of 6 or 7 years, where after returning from London and sort of having this really interesting time over there, is that there was nothing like that in New Zealand. And so, events and financial regulation didn't exist, and on the scale that we were doing them. And it sort of gave, I took a big knock in confidence in terms of, well, what do I do? And I think after I had my second child, I really struggled to sort of find out where I belonged from a career perspective. And I jumped around a couple of different things and sort of, gave up quite easily on a couple of situations where where the going got tough. I was like, what, to your point, George, there's a couple of differences in values, and I didn't want to be there. And then I gave a crack at being self-employed, because I thought that's what I should do. Should I go contracting? And nothing was really sticking, and I was really restless and not that happy. And again, by reaching out to people saying, actually, I don't know I don't have the answer for this. Can you help me explore what I'm doing and where what my career to date has looked like, and what gold or value can I draw out of that in terms of being able to move forward with a future plan. And that's again how I sort of ended up here at EY, because I realized I had unfinished business with the corporate world. So I wanted to go back into that corporate environment, and the beautiful thing about EY, and very lucky to work where I do, is from a family perspective. I've been able to juggle, not juggle, but have the flexibility that I can have with my children, and with my family and with my husband, because EY gives us the space, you know, and the ability to do that. So I guess, yeah, that was my biggest challenge, was basically working out what did I want to do? Where do I fit in this world? Because I didn't know that for quite some time.
I know we're running out of time, so yeah, I've struggled to find one, but I mean, a huge piece that impacted me was really making that decision to leave the Defence Force, because it's your family, and it's really, really hard to let go. And it was a pretty challenging time, but man, I haven't looked back. I absolutely loved that time in my life, but I've created a whole nother life. And it's not like you've lost it. They are your family for life, funny enough. But yeah, doing that in my mid-20s and then becoming an adult student at university, because I wanted to challenge myself, was a pretty big thing to do. But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I'd be a full-time student forever if I could afford to.
So would I, in a heartbeat.
Well, we've just got one final question. It's a great one to finish off with, is from Vicky saying, are you worried or excited about the New Zealand space on the global platform of innovation? Do you think COVID's going to slow us down, or are you seeing a lot of activity as a result of it?
And I don't have the stats, but I think it's our time to shine, because we are used to coming from adversity, making something out of nothing and excelling on the world stage. So I think we are primed to be awesome.
I would 100% agree with George on that. I think, you know, for us to shine is not to drag each other down. So, you know, the tall poppy thing, people say, oh no, we're overcoming that. You know, we've still got a long way to go on that. And, you know, I don't want to sort of espouse the team of 5 million kind of quote, but our success is about, you know, New Zealand's success, particularly on that platform, is about collaboration. Yep. It's, you know, about recognizing the amazing work that, you know, these companies and organizations and people are doing, lifting them up, collaborating together, and that's, you know, that's how we're going to be successful.
100% agree. Totally excited about what's coming. I mean, I see it every day. The people and the way that people think under this blanket of COVID has just created this enormous opportunity for people to think differently. And we're already seeing it. You're seeing it in the amazing companies that are pivoting. Special word that we all seem to tout about at the moment. But it's awesome. It's awesome to watch, and it's awesome to be able to support. So go forth and conquer. There's so many great opportunities out there.
That's amazing, and a real great positive way to end. I want to thank all three of you. Your stories have been really inspiring for all of us, and some great advice there. I think we all need to get back to our 8-year-old selves and get back into that creative and curiosity phase. And I think one of the key messages too has come through, it's a journey, you know, and we've got to surround ourselves with people, ask for help along the way, and reach out to those connections. And yeah, all of us really are absolutely capable of being innovators, and we've just got to get back inside to our 8-year-old and find out what we want to do and take it from there. So thanks very much for that. Just in terms of wrapping up now, in terms of the BWN, those who are not aware of Businesswomen's Network and would want to become more involved in our meetings, etc., please drop me a line, or jump onto the Tauranga Chamber of Commerce website and have a look there and sign up to our newsletter. Our next event coming up is on Tuesday, the 11th of August, and we're doing a business behind the scenes event. In fact, this month we're changing it slightly, and it's going to be a charity behind the scenes event, as it's 30 years since the Cancer Society have had Daffodil Day. So we are working with the Cancer Society for Waikato Bay of Plenty, and we have their CEO, Shelley Campbell, coming along and speaking to us, as well as a special guest, former New Zealand Olympian Beatrice Balmoina will also be speaking and talking about how we can foster a culture of giving back to the community, staff, etc. So jump onto, as I said, Tauranga Chamber of Commerce website, and that event will be there on the calendar. But thank you everybody, and particularly thank you to our panel, and everyone have a great afternoon.